In this tutorial I will create a so-called Windows Forms CRUD application using Visual Studio, C# and SQL Server. A CRUD application means that the application are retrieving data from a database, in this case an SQL Server. It is inserting data into the database, it updates data that are stored in the database, and finally it's also delete data that are stored in the database. So that's a so-called CRUD application. So here's the contents of this tutorial. First a short introduction, then I will create the necessary tables in SQL Server, then we will start creating the application in Visual Studio, and then we will create the application step by step. So first an introduction. So the goal here is to create a basic Windows Forms application in Visual Studio. It will communicate with an SQL Server Database. It will insert, retrieve, update and delete data using SQL Server Database. And the application will be created in iterations, so we will create it step by step. It will be some copy-paste to save time, and not all details will be explained in detail, so it's assumed that you are familiar with Visual Studio and basic C# programming. So here is the application that we're going to create. So here is the main application. It is a book system or a library or whatever you call it. It has a data grid view with a list of books where you have title, ISBN number, publisher, author and category. And then you can click on new in order to add a new book to this list that will be stored in the SQL Server Database. You can select one of the existing one, click edit, and then this window will open in order to edit one of the existing books that are stored in the database. And finally you can also click delete in order to delete one of the items in the list. So basically this is a standard CRUD application where you have insert, delete, retrieving data and updating data from a database. So CRUD means creating, reading, updating and deleting data in a database from your application. So the CRUD application that are presented here can be a foundation for all your Windows Forms application, because typically all applications today needs to communicate with a database and has basic CRUD functionality. So when you learn to create a basic CRUD application like this, you can use this as a foundation for all your application. So we make this application in iterations or step by step. So we first start by creating an SQL Server Database and the necessary tables. Then we create a Windows Forms applications in Visual Studio. Then we start creating the main form. And in the main form, as you saw in this example, it's a data grid view. And then we will create the necessary classes. We will create a database view for retrieving data, etc. Then we will create a new book form, which is this one. And here we will create a stored procedure for inserting data into the database, and we will create a method for inserting the data into this database using this stored procedure. And then we will create the edit book form with necessary stored procedure and methods for updating and retrieving the data from the database. And finally we will also create this delete functionality where we are able to delete one of the selected items that are stored in the database. And finally we will finalize the application, polish it and make it a professional application. So that's the necessary steps to create a basic CRUD application in Visual Studio and using a desktop application. So then let's start by creating the necessary database in SQL Server and the necessary tables. So this is the tables that we are going to use in this example. So the main table is this book table. We have book ID, title, ISBN number, publisher ID, author ID and category ID. And these are foreign keys to these three tables. So we have publisher ID is a foreign key to the publisher table that we have here. So here we have publisher ID, which is the primary key, and then we have the publisher name. And similar for the author table, we have the author ID and the author name. And then we have the category table with the category ID and the category name. So basically that's the tables that we need in order to create this CRUD application. So let's go to Visual Studio and create the database and these tables. So here I am inside my Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and here I have my databases. So I want to create a new database, and I just right click, create a new database, and then I just call my database library or something, since I'm going to create books that are stored in the database, so I can call it library. Then click OK, and then I have the library database here, and I can click new query, and then I just open the necessary tables that I have stored on my computer. So I have a folder here on my computer where I'm going to store the Visual Studio application and the database scripts that are necessary. So then let's start with the tables. So I just open my table script with the necessary table. So we have a script for creating the author table, a script for creating the publisher table, and then a script for creating the category table, and finally we create the book table. So then I can just click here on execute in order to insert this table into the database system. And then I can go here on my library database, I can click refresh, and then go under tables here, and then you see we have these tables created in our database. So now we are ready to start creating our application, but first typically we also want to insert some default data. So then I have created a script for that are inserting some default data into the category table, some data that are inserting into the author table, same for the publisher and same for the book table. So then I just run this script as well by clicking execute. And then if I go to the book table here now, select top 100 rows, and you see there are now created 3 different books in my library system. So the title is Introduction to Linear Algebra, Modern Control System, etc. So now we are going to create an application in Visual Studio that are retrieving these values from the database and present them in a data grid view. So now we are ready to start creating our application in Visual Studio. So then we start by creating a Windows Forms desktop application using Visual Studio. And then we start creating the main form, which is, you see here, which is consisting of a data grid view where we are going to present or show the books that are available in the database. So we start with the main form, which is this one. And you see it here. So we just start by creating a data grid view. What's other necessary steps needs to be done in order to create this this form. So since we are going to create a data grid view here that are retrieving data from the database, typically we want to create a database view for retrieving data from the database. So I have created a database view that I'm going to insert into my database called get book data. Then I'm going to create the graphical user interface, which is a data grid view. Then we need to create a class in our Visual Studio project. I call the class for book. Then I need to add a NuGet package to include Microsoft.data.sql client in order to be able to use the feature for communicating with a database within my C# code. Then I'm going to create a method in the book class called getBooks in order to retrieve the necessary data from the database using this view. And then finally we need to create or use this getBooks method inside our main form. So let's start by creating this database view in SQL Server Database. So we are back in SQL Server Management Studio. Then I just open a script here. So I have a script for my database view, and the view is called get book data. It's basically retrieving data from these 4 tables: the book table, the author table, the publisher table, and the category table. So then I just click execute like this, and then here in my database I just click refresh, I click view, and then you see the view has been created. So then I can create a simple query like this: select all from get book data, like this. I click execute, and then you see this view. By using this view, I'm able to retrieve the different books, the ISBN number, the publisher name, the author name, and the category name, like this. So this is the information that we are going to retrieve into our Visual Studio application and the data grid view. So then we are back in Visual Studio, and then I just create this data grid view. I find it here in the toolbox, data grid view, and just drag it inside the form like this. Make it the proper size, something like this. So basically that's all we need to do in the graphical user interface so far, and later we will create buttons for new, edit, delete, etc. But we start by retrieving the available books from the database using this data grid view. And then we can also change the name for this default form, which is called form 1, so we can change it to just right click, rename, and we can call it main form or something, indicating this is the main and startup form for this application, like this. Then we create a proper name for this data grid view, and then you go to the properties here. You can just change the name, so I just call it data grid view books or something. And now next we want to create a database class, so then I just right click here on the project, click select add and class, and then I just want to create a new class, and I can call it book, like this. And then this class will be created here in the Solution Explorer. So then I can just start creating the necessary parts of this class. So I start to create the necessary properties inside this class. Which is the book ID, the title, the ISBN number, the publisher name, the author name, and the category name. So this is the information that we want to retrieve from the database and put into the data grid view. I can also change the class to be a public class, since we are going to use this class from our main form. So basically this is the properties that we need. And next we need to create a connection string to the database. So then we just start by creating a variable string, connection string, like this, and then we need to create the necessary connection string to our database. So then the connection string would look something like this. Data source is the name of my SQL server, which is this one. And then initial catalog is the name of the database, which I named library. So basically this is the connection string that we need to use in order to be able to connect to the SQL Server Database. So now next we need to create a method inside this class in order to retrieve the necessary books from the database. So then you just start by creating a new public method inside this class. Sorry, public. I can call it get books, like this. So this is my new method. I also need to have a return value, so then we are going to create a list of books. That should be the return value, like this. So basically this is the method. Now we need to create the contents of this method. So in order to save some time, I've copied the necessary code into the getBooks method. But first, we also need to include this necessary NuGet package. So then I go to the project, right-click, manage NuGet packages. Then I go to browse and then search for this Microsoft Data package. So then Microsoft Data dot SQL so here I find the packet Microsoft Data.SQL client, like this. So here I found it, Microsoft.data.SQL client. So I just select it and then click install in order to install this NuGet package. So we are able to use the this feature in order to communicate with the SQL Server Database and able to retrieve data, etc. So then we just install it. Click accept, and now this package is installed, so then you can just save and close this. And now you need to in top here we need to include the namespace as well, so using Microsoft data.SQL client, like this. So this is the necessary namespace we need to include in order to use this functionality in our application. So these other namespaces here is not needed in this case, so we can just delete them like this. So let's go back to the getBooks method, which you find here. And let's go through the main features here. So I create a list of book like this, which should be a list of available books from the database that we are going to should be the return value of this method, and this list of books should be presented in the data grid view. Then you need to create an SQL connection in order to create a connection to the database using this connection string we have created here. Then we need to create an SQL query. So in this case, select book ID, title, ISBN, publisher name, author name, category name from this get book data. This is the database view we just created. Then you use com.open in order to open the connection to the database, and then use SQL command to run this query against the database. And then in the SQL reader we will retrieve the values from the database, and then inside this while loop we are retrieving the values from the database row by row. So then inside this book object that is consisting of book ID, title, ISBN, publisher name, etc., we are retrieving the necessary values from the database, namely the book ID, title, etc. And all these values inside the while loop will retrieve all the data from the database, and it will be stored in this list of books that are containing this information from the database. So now we have done the necessary thing in our class, so I just close this one and go back to the main form. Then I just right click here, view code, and then we start creating our own method here. We can call it fill grid view or something. And this method shall be used to be retrieving the necessary data from the database. So then we just and also here on top here we need to include this necessary namespace. So then we're just using bookup dot so typically also want to put the our classes. In this case there is only one classes, but assume you want to create multiple classes, then it is good to put those classes into a separate folder. So then I just create a new folder here, called it classes, and then I put the book class into this folder like this. No, the book class are inside this classes folder. So then I just type bookup.classes like this, in order to be able to use the class and the methods inside here in this main form. So now let's create a list here. So now I have created an object of this book class. I'm going to create a list using this list syntax. So all the books from the database should be stored in this book list. Next, I just create an object of this book class like this. Then we need to create or use the method we created in the book class, which is named getBooks. So then we just use book list, which is equal to book dot, and then we find our method which is called getBooks like this. And finally, now all the books that are stored in the database are now stored in this variable. So finally we just need to put that list of books into the data grid view. So then we have the data grid view. So then just type data grid view books dot data source equals to the book list like this. So the data source will now be filled with the list of books that are retrieved from the database using this getBooks method. So basically this should be enough. So then also inside this main form we need to call this fill grid view method like this. Now we can run the application. And as you see, data grid view has been created and the data inside are retrieved from the database. So basically this is the first step of creating this Windows Forms CRUD application using Visual Studio, C# and SQL Server Database. So let's take the next step, creating this CRUD application. So we are going to create a library system where we are going to view the available books that are stored in the database, and then the next feature is to create a new book, namely insert new data into the database. So then we are going to create a new form looking something like this, where we have the available fields as text boxes that should be stored into the database. So then we have a text box for title, ISBN number, publisher, author and category. And then when you click on the OK button, these values should be stored in the database, and the data list view should be updated with the new information that are stored in the database. So what are we going to, what kind of steps are we going to do in order to make this happen? So first we need to create a stored procedure for inserting data into the database. I will call the stored procedure create book. Then in the main form we will need to create a button called new, and then we click on this button, this new form should pop up. So then we need to create the graphical user interface here with labels, text boxes, buttons for OK for saving, and cancel for just cancelling the information and go back to the main form. We need to update the book class with a new method for inserting these data into the database. We will call this method create book. And finally we will use this new method create book inside this new book form that we are going to create now. So then we are back in in SQL Server Management Studio. I just click open in order to create this stored procedure. So I have created a script here called create book, which is a stored procedure for inserting a new book into the database. So then we have a stored procedure called create book that has the input arguments title, ISBN, publisher name, author name, and category name. And then we start by checking if the category exists in the database. If not, we are inserting the category into the category table. The same for the author. If the author doesn't exist, we insert it into the author table, and the same for the publisher. And then finally we are creating the book inside the book table like this. So basically that's the stored procedure for creating a book. So then I just click execute here in order to insert this stored procedure into the database. I can click refresh here on my database, and here I will find this stored procedure that we just created. So now we will use this stored procedure inside our C# code in order to store the necessary fields from our graphical user interface into the database. So then we are back in Visual Studio. Let's start by creating here in the main form. First we also should change the name for it. We could call it library system or something. So that's a better title than form 1. Next we should create a button, a new button. So then I just drag in a button here. I go to the properties here, change the name, button, new form or something, and then I also update the name. I just call it name that should be present on the button is new. I just put it here below the data grid view like this. I also can double click here in order to create an event for this button, namely button new form underscore click. So inside here we should later create the necessary code, and basically that's the code for opening a new form that we are going to create now. So then let's create this new form. So I just right click here on the project, select add on a form, and then we just name it new book form or something like that. Save it, and then we have the new form here, new book form, and now we are going to create the graphical user interface with lots of text boxes. So then I just start by creating some text boxes. So then I created these necessary text boxes, one for title, ISBN number, publisher, author, and category. And then on top of each of them I have also using a label. I have created 2 buttons, one OK button. When you click the OK button, you should store this information into the database. When you click cancel, we just go back to the main form. Can also make it a smaller like this. So basically this is the graphical user interface for this new book form. Can of course also change the title here, just call it new book, like this. I also can double click here in order to create this event. So inside here we are going to create the necessary code for storing this information to the database. So we have already created the stored procedure for saving this information to the database. So the next step now would be to go to the book class and create a new method, and then we can call it create book or something like this. And then this also should be a public class. It doesn't need to return anything, but the input or the argument should be these different properties, book, namely title, ISBN, publisher name, author, and category ID, which should be stored inside the database like this. So this should be the input argument, and now we just need to create the main part of this method. So in order to save some time, I'll copy the code that are needed into this create book method. So we create the connection to the database using the connection string that we have here. We create an SQL command, and that is of a type stored procedure, which we have created earlier in SQL Server, and then the different parameters was title, ISBN, publisher name, author name, and category name. And then, since this book is an input argument to this method, then you can type book.title, book.isbn, book.publisher name, etc. in order to get the correct values and then store these values into the database. So now we have finished with this create book method. Then we can go back to our main form. So now when we click on this button, we should go into this event handler and open this new form. So then we can type here new book form like this. I can change the name here, form new book. That's just a name, you can call it whatever you like. So now I'm creating an object of this new book form like this, and then I can just type form new book, show a dialog box like this. So basically, just by creating these two lines of code, we are able to open this new form. So let's just run the application and see if it works as expected. So here in the main application, which I have now called library system, we have this data grid view, and we have this new button called new. So I can click this one, and then you see this new form, new book are retrieving, but so far nothing happens when we click on these buttons, since we haven't created the necessary code in order to store this information into the database. So far nothing happened, but the graphical user interface works as expected. So now we need to create necessary code in order to store this information into the database. So now we are back in the new book form, and we have this event handler for clicking on the book OK button, and inside here we need to create the necessary code in order to store the information from these text boxes into the database. So then we can start by creating a new function. We can call it save book data or something, a new method like this. And inside here we need to create the necessary code in order to store the information from the database. And then we can start by creating, first we need to include the necessary namespace, namely using bookup.classes. By creating this line of code, we are able to use these methods in the book class. Then here inside this save book data method, we can create book equals new book in order to create an object of this book class. Then we can type like this, book.title equal to this text boxes, the first text box, txt title dot text, like this, and a semicolon. So now the information that are stored here in the text box are now put into this title property of the book object like this, and then we do the same for the others. And then finally we call the new method we created in the book classes. So just book dot create book, which is this method we created in the class. In the class called book, like this. And this method are using the store procedure in order to store this information into the database. And then an input argument to this method would be this book data, like this. So basically, this is the necessary code in order to store the information from these text boxes into the database using this create book method. And then we can use this save book method we have created here in this OK underscore click event, like this. So now we are ready to test our application and see if it works as expected. There's one thing we need to do. Just type this dot close, meaning that we are, when we click the OK button, we call this save book data that are calling the create book method, which are storing the necessary information to the database. And when the necessary information are stored in the database, we want to close this new book form and go back to the main form that we have here. So let's just run the application. So here we have the 3 books that are already available in the database. Let's click new. We want to create a new book. So then we have, yes, you can call it test. ISBN number 12345, publisher, Wiley or something, author is me, category is, it could be data or something, assuming we want to create a C# programming book, and then we just click OK, and now hopefully the data are stored in the database. So let's go to our SQL Server Database. Just close this one and then just type select all from the book table and then click execute. And then you see the new book has now been created into the database. The title, C programming, the ISBN number, the publisher, author and the category. So the data has been stored in the database, but this list hasn't been updated. So we also need to make sure that this list is updated with the new data. So this means when we click here, new here, put in the new information, click OK, then we need to refresh this data grid view. I guess there are different ways to do that, but I just click on the data grid view, go to the property window and select events. So I click just on the form here and then click events, and then I want to use the activated event. So then I just click here in order to create this new event, main form underscore activated. This means when we click new here, a new form is opened, and then we click save, and then this main form will be activated and this event will occur. So then we have already created this fill grid view method that are executed when the form is opening the first time, but also we want to put it into this event handler called main form underscore activated. This means that when the focus is going back to the main form after we click OK in the new book form, this event will trigger, and then the data grid view will be updated with the list with the latest information stored in the database. Let's just try our application once more. Just click save, open application, and let's create a new book. I just call it test, something here, an author and a category, and something like this. And now when I click OK, this information should be stored in the database, and the data grid view in the back here should be updated with this new information. And as you see, since we are using this main form underscore activated, and inside here we have this fill grid view, the new information from the database are put into the data grid view. So basically now we are one step closer to the finished application. We have a list here where we are retrieving values from the database. We have a new button where you can create a new book. Next we should be able to select one of these rows and then have an edit button in order to edit the information that are stored in the database by opening a new form where we can edit either the title, ISBN number, publisher, author, and the category. So that's the next step. So let's go to the next step of creating this CRUD application where we're going to retrieve, insert, edit, and delete data from an SQL Server Database. So now we are going to create the edit book form where we update existing data in the database. So here you see the graphical user interface. It's almost identical as the new book form. It has the same text boxes, but now when we open this edit book form, it should be filled out with the information from the selected book in the data grid view, and then we should be able to change the values, either the title, ISBN number, publisher, author, or category, and then click OK in order to change or update that information in the SQL Server Database. So here you see the necessary steps in order to create this edit book form and the code necessary in order to update a specific book or update information regarding a specific book in the SQL Server Database. So we need to create a store procedure. I will call it update book. We need to create edit button. So we need to create an edit button in the main form GUI. Then we need to create a new form, which we can call edit book form. Then inside this new form, we need to create the necessary text boxes, labels, buttons, etc. Then we need to update the book class with a new method for first retrieving information regarding the selected book and fill out these text boxes with the information that are stored in the database. Next, we need to create another method in this book class. We can call it edit book. So when we are changing the information here, we need to click OK and then store the updated information to the database. So that should happening in the edit book method. So basically these are the main steps needed in order to create this edit book functionality. So let's start by creating this stored procedure. So we are back in SQL Server Management Studio. I just open and find this update book stored procedure, which is basically has the same inputs as the create book stored procedure. In addition, it has the book ID, and if figure out if the category, the author and the publisher are already stored in the database. If not, we are inserting these categories, author or publisher, and then we use the update command in SQL in order to update the title field and other fields for this specific book in the database. So basically, this is the store procedure. You click just execute, and then go here, refresh, and under here we find this new store procedure called update book. Then we are back in Visual Studio. We need to create this new form, so then I just right click, add form, and now I just call it edit book form, and click add. And this new form is now created. So now we are going to use the same text boxes as in the new book form. So I just open the new book form, which is here. I just copy all the labels, text boxes and buttons. Like this, and then go back to the edit book form and paste it in. Like this. So now we have created this new edit book form with the necessary text boxes and buttons like this. And then first thing we need to do is to retrieve information from the database within these text boxes, and then we can change them and click OK in order to save this new updated information to the database. But first we need to go back to the main form, our library system, the main form where we have the data grid view. We want to create a new button. So then I just copy this button. I put it here, something like that. I should go into the properties here. And then just change the name, button, edit button, open edit form or something, and then I'd also change the name to edit like this. So now we have two buttons, one new and one edit, and then when you click the edit button and select one of the books in this data grid view, click edit, then this edit book form should be open, and then we should retrieve information into these text boxes like this. So then I just double click here in order to create an open edit form click event. So inside here I can create a new method called edit book or something that we are calling. And then I need to create this method below here. So then void edit book like this. And inside here we need to find which row that the user are clicking on. So then I just type int. So I need to find the specific book ID for the specific book that the user is clicking on. So then I type book ID equal to the data grid view books, and then we have a method called current row, which we are going to use. And then here we have we need to figure out which cell that are clicked, and then the first cell or the first column will be the book ID, and then we need to find the value like this. So basically also we need since we need to convert it to an integer, since we have created this book ID as an integer variable, so then we just cast it by typing int like this. So now when the user are clicking in the data grid view on a specific row, then the specific book ID will be put into the book ID variable, and then we can open this new form, this edit book form, by using this syntax: edit book form for something like this equals to new like this. Skal vi se, I have some spelling mistakes here. To new like this. So we are creating an object of this edit book form, and then we just type form edit book dot show dialog in order to open this form like this. And now we need to pass this book ID to this edit book form, so then we just pass it here, book ID like this, and then in the edit book form here we have the constructor, and then inside here we just type int book ID like this. So by that we can pass this selected book and the book ID from the main form here into this new edit book form like this. So here in the constructor we just type int book ID, and then in the main form we just do like this in order to pass the selected book ID to this new edit book form. Next we need to go to the book class in order to update the book class with a new method for retrieving the selected book information from the database. So then in our book class we need to create this new method. I just copy the code in to save some time. So I have created now a new method called getBookData, and the input to this method is the book ID, and then we are retrieving the specific book information where the book ID is this selected book ID. And then inside this while loop we are retrieving the selected information from the database, and this value is now returned into this object here, which we are going to use in the edit book form code. So then we are back in the edit book form.cs. So let's create a new method here. I just pass in the code in order to save some time. So I created a new method called getBookData that are retrieving the necessary information regarding this book from the database. So then we use this getBookData method in our constructor here like this. And then since this book ID is, we are retrieving the book ID here, we can just and here I'm using the name selected book ID, so I just create an integer here, integer selected book ID equals to book ID like this. And also I can put this outside the constructor to make this a global variable in this class, like this. So basically this is the necessary code. So here I just define the variable, and inside here I'm using it. Then I remove this one. Like this. So then in the constructor here, we are retrieving the selected book ID from the previous form, this main form. So we select a book in the data grid view, and then we transform the book ID to this new form, this edit book form, into the constructor, and then we has created a new method here for get book data, which we are calling here. So let's see what's happening when we now run this code. So here we are retrieving books from the database. I just select one of them, click edit, and then you see that specific book has now been retrieved from the database and put into these text boxes. So let's just close it and select another one, click edit, and then you see this book has been retrieved from the database. And now basically next step now is to change some of this information and click OK in order to update this information to the database. But so far we haven't created necessary code, so now we need to go back to the book class in order to create a method that are updating these updated value and put them into the database. So then we are back in the book.cs class. We need to create another method for updating a specific book into the database. So then we need to create this new method called edit book data. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one, so I'll just copy the code in to save some time. So here is the new method edit book, which are basically the input argument is the updated book information, and then this information are stored in the database using this update book stored procedure we created earlier. Well, so to make the code a bit simpler, I just remove this try catch. So just use the necessary code like this. So basically this is the new method edit book, which are using this update book store procedure and store the necessary information or update the necessary information to the database. So then you need to use this this edit book method in the edit book form. So that's the next step. So then I start by creating a new method here in the edit book form. I just copy the code in order to save some time, so I call it edit book data. It are retrieving the data from these different text boxes into this book object, and then finally it is calling this edit book method that is part of the book class in order to update the book information into the database. And then you can use this edit book method in this OK button event handler like this. So now when you click the OK button, this edit book data method will be called, and this one again called this edit book method in the book class, which are calling the store procedure in order to update the book information. And also here, as we did in the new book form, we want to, when you click the OK button, we want to close this form and go back to the main form. So then I'm just here in the, after we have updated the information in the database, I can just type this close like this in order to close this form. So now the necessary code should be finished. Then let's just open the application. So here we have the main form with these books. Let's see if we are able to change this book by clicking edit. and then you see the current information regarding this book has been retrieved from the database. And then let's just change some information here, the ISBN number to 555 or something, click OK, and then you see the ISBN number for this specific book has been updated like this. We can change it back to something else, 333, we can change the category to science or something, click OK, and then you see both the ISBN number has been updated and the category has been updated. So now we are very close to be finished with our CRUD application. Here we are retrieving values from the database in this data grid view. We are able to insert new data into the database, or by selecting one of the existing rows, we are able to update some of this information in the database. So the next step now is to create a delete button and also be able to delete some of the selected information and delete the information in the database as well. So the next step is to be able to delete information from the database. So we want to delete a specific book that are selected in the data grid view. So basically we don't need to create a new form for this, so we just need to create a new button called delete or something, and then when we select a specific book in the data grid view, then click delete. We want to delete that specific book from the database, and then refresh this main page by removing that specific book. So what's needed to be done in order to create this delete functionality? We need to create a new stored procedure, and we can call it delete book. We need to add this delete button. We need to update the book class with a new method called delete book, and then we need to use this delete book method inside this main form. So basically that's the steps needed. So let's start by creating this stored procedure. So we are back in SQL Server Management Studio. I just open this delete book store procedure, which is very simple. It's just using the delete query, delete from book where book ID, and then the book ID is the input argument to this delete book store procedure. So then I just click execute in order to input this store procedure into the database, and as you see here, the delete book has been stored inside the database. So back in Visual Studio, we need to create a new button. So we have a new edit, and then we want to have a delete button, which we put here. So then I click on it, change name to button book delete or something, and then change it to delete. So now we have the 3 necessary buttons, and then here is the event handler for this delete book button. And now we need to create this new method in the book class for deleting this selected book from the database. So then I'll just copy in the necessary code in order to save some time. And then we have the delete book method here in the book class, and then this delete book method are calling this delete book stored procedure we created. So then we just need to delete this, use this delete book method in the main form. So here in the main form, we just start by creating a new method. We can call it delete book, something like this. And then this delete book method should be called from the book delete event handler like this. And then we copy some code from the edit book here that we have created earlier, because here we find the selected book, and we also here need to find the selected book. Of course it has a return value, in this case just void, and then here we create this book equals to new book, like this, and then we can use this delete book method, which is in the book class, like this, and the input to this one should be book ID, like this. So basically this piece of code makes sure that selected book are deleted from the database, and then also you need to refresh the data grid view, and then you just use this fill grid view at the end of this method in order to update the data grid view. So basically this is all the code that we need to do in order to delete a book from the database. So then just let's open the database, the application, and now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books in the database. I select this book called C Programming, I click delete, and as you see it was deleted from the list here. And also if we go to the SQL Server Management Studio, select all from book, and then you see it has also been deleted from the database. You can do the same with this book called test, delete. It has been deleted from the data grid view and also from the database. So basically now we have created an application with basic CRUD feature for retrieving data from the database, creating data by opening this new book form, edit information that are stored in the database by this edit book form, and then finally by selecting one of the items, clicking delete, we are also able to delete information from the database. So basically this is a simple CRUD application created in Visual Studio using C# and the SQL Server Database. So now we have created a fully working CRUD application, but typically we need to do some publishing in order to make the application have this professional look and feel. So basically we have created these 3 forms. The main form where you have a list of books, then you can click new in order to open the new form, edit in order to edit an existing book in this list, and then finally delete. But there are lots of improvements to make in order to make this a more professional application. Here are some examples. You can disable the resize buttons for the different forms. That's one improvement. We can improve it by make it possible to double click here and then open the edit form. When you click the delete button, typically you want to have pop up a message box that's saying, do you really want to delete? So that's an improvement. Typically you also want to change the tab order, so then you can use the tab in order to tab between these text boxes in the new book and the edit book in the correct order. You can also adjust the data grid view so that it fills the entire screen. You can change the headers. Instead of using the headers from the database, we can make our own header, assuming you want to have the header in a different language, etc. Then we can make our own header names on top of this data grid view. We can also put the connection string in a configuration file called appconfig, because this makes it easier to change the connection string to the database without updating the code. We can just go into this text file and update the connection string. So these are some improvements that I will show in order to make this a more professional application. So the first thing I want to fix if you see, if I click here on this maximize button, the program looks like this, and it doesn't look nice because this is a lot of empty space that is not needed. So I want to disable this button, so it's not possible to click on it. I also will do the same for the new one. So we here have the same here. You can click like this, but it doesn't look any nice. Same for the edit. You can click on the resize, but it doesn't look any nice. So let's just disable these buttons. And then let's start with the main form. I go into the properties and then select maximum box, which is default true. I just set it to false, and do the same for the new book form. So this maximize box set to false for the new book, and the same for the edit book. Maximize box set to false like this. So now when you run the application, you are not able to click on this maximum icon in order to maximize the window. So same for the new, and for the edit. Oh, sorry, I didn't able to finish the edit one. So let's go back to the edit one. Maximize box needs to be set to false, like this. So now this should be okay. The next thing I want to do when I click either this new book, when you click on the cancel button, I want to go back to the main form in the same manner as you click on this close button. But so far, when I click on the cancel button, nothing happens. And the same for the edit book form, nothing happens when I click on the cancel button. So let's see how we can fix this. So then let's start with the new book form. So I just select the form and then select the proper property, which is cancel button, which is default none, but I just select to be the button cancel. Save it. I'll do the same for the edit one. Cancel button, I set it to be button cancel. And now when I open the application, click new, then I can click cancel, and then the form is closing and go back to the main form. And same for edit, I can click cancel and it's actually working. So now we are one step further to a more professional application. The next step to make a more professional application is to change this the default icon. So I have an icon here in the main form, and also in the other forms you have this default icon. So let's see how we can change these icons. So then I just go to the project, the Solution Explorer. I just have made some images I want to include. So then I just select here, add existing item, and then I just select a folder I have created here with some images, resources, which I just want to add to the project. Let's start by creating this folder here. Add new folder, I call it resources, like this, and then right click, add existing item, and then I just need to select all files here, and I have these three icons. Click add, and then these three icons are added to the solution file. And then I start with the main form. I want to change this icon, so then I just find the property called icon here in the property list. So here you see the default icon. I just select this new icon called books, and then you see the default icon has been changed. I can do the same for new book. Then I have another icon here, new book, and then finally for the edit book, I click and select this one, and then if I run the application now, the application will have a tailor-made icon here in the main form. It has another icon here in the new book, and it has another icon here in the edit book form, like this. And also I have changed the name here, new book. This one is called edit book form, so let's change that one as well. So basically it's about changing different types of properties to make the application more professional. Then this will be the title of this one. Next, when you click the delete button, I want to have a message box that's saying, do you really want to delete this item? So then just here in the delete book method, I just make some changes. So here you see the updated code. So here I'm using a message box, and the title delete, it has two buttons, yes and no, and this message, are you sure that you want to delete the book? And here you see the book title that I'm retrieving from the data grid view, like this. And then if the user are clicking on the yes button, we are actually deleting the book and updating the data grid view. And if the user are clicking no, nothing happens. So let's run this code as well. So now when I select one of the rows here, I can click delete, and then you see this message box is popping up. Are you sure that you want to delete the book The Lord of the Rings? If I click no, nothing happens. If I select it once more, click delete, and then click yes, and then you see it will be deleted from the database. So then you have this extra layer of security, because it's easy to click on this button without meaning it. So then you have this extra security by make sure that the user are actually want to delete this information from the database. Next improvement is to set the proper tab index. So I'll select the first one, the title, then you have the tab index here. I just set this one to 1, the next one to 2, this one to 3, 4, and finally 5, and then the OK button will then be 6, and the cancel button will be 7, like this. So I do the same for the edit book. So 1, 2, 3, etc. So when I run the application now and click the new button, and you see I can use a tab in order to tab between the text boxes and the buttons in correct order. I can do the same for edit. So I can tab between them using the tab button, and I do it in the correct order. So then you can also, in addition to the mouse, using the keyboard for easier editing the different fields. So that's another improvement to make this application more professional. The next improvement would be to increase the width of the different columns, so it fills the entire screen here, and also change the title of the headers, because now the default here is the same name as the name in the database, but typically you may want to use other names than the name in the database. Assume you have made the graphical user interface in another language than the database, etc. So let's see how we can do that. So then we're back in the main form. I go to the code, and then let's just create a new method. I can call it adjust grid view or something. So here in adjust grid view method, I just use data grid view books dot column and 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. and then set the or change the header text to book ID, title, etc. And then here you can specify whatever name you want for the different headers. And here I also set the width for the different columns. And then I just use this, or call this adjust grid view in the constructor, like this. A semicolon of course is needed. So let's just run application. And then as you see, the headers has been changed according to this new code, and also the different columns has been wider, so it fits the entire size of the user interface, and the title has been longer, so you are able to see the entire title, entire ISBN number, the entire publisher, author, etc. So now we are very close to making a professional application. One more thing I want to improve is to change the location of the connection string. So now the connection string is hard-coded here in the book class, but assuming you want to create an executable application, then you often want to change the connection string to another database without updating the code, just updating a configuration file. So then we need to create this configuration file. Then I just right click here on the project, select add new item, and here under C# items I just find the proper one, settings file or something. So this one, settings file, and then I can just change the name to app.config, which is the default configuration file in a desktop application. So then I just click add, and then this file has been created here. And then I just update the file with information regarding the connection string. So then I have a section called connection string here, and then I just, my database is called library. So this is the, my SQL Server Database. This is the name of the database, etc. So this basically, this is now connection string is now put into this app config file instead. So then I can go back to the book class. I can disable this one, and now the next step is to add the proper NuGet package. So then I just go to the project here, right click, manage NuGet package, and then search for system.configuration configuration manager, like this. So here on top I find the proper NuGet package, system.configuration manager. So then I just click install. In order to install this package, I click just OK, and now this package is installed. And then I'm back in the book class, just adding this line of code. So now instead of hard coding the connection string here, I just use the configuration manager in order to get the connection string from this app config. But I also need to include it here in the namespace using so I need to include using system.configuration, which you find here. So this is the namespace where the configuration manager is located. So now this line of code does mean something. So then I just put the connection string into this variable by using the configuration manager that are actually retrieving the connection string from this app config file. and then this connection string is used in the different methods in this class. So let's see if the code are working in the same way. And as you see here now, I was running the application, but now instead of using the hard-coded connection string, the connection string are now stored in the app config file, and it can easily be changed without changing the code. So now the final proof now would be to just build the application. So then click build. I close Visual Studio here, go to my go to my folder where I have the application. So here on my hard drive, here are my book app. I can go to binary, debug, and .NET 6 Windows, and then here I have a file called bookapp.exe, which is actually an executable file. So now I don't need to use Visual Studio. I can just open this one without having Visual Studio. So let's just open it, and then you see I can now run the application without using Visual Studio. So I have the book list here inside the data grid view. I can click new in order to add new books. I can click edit in order to edit an existing book. I can click delete in order to delete a book, etc. So basically now we have created a complete Windows Forms CRUD application where we are retrieving data, inserting data, editing data, and deleting data from the database. And we have created an executable application with user specified icons. So we are able to run the application without the Visual Studio. And then finally, if you want to, basically if you want to distribute this application to another user, you can just copy the entire folder here and just send it to the customer or whatever, and then the customer don't need to have Visual Studio installed. Just open the bookapp.exe, which is the application, and then inside the bookapp.dll.config, which is the runtime version of the app config file, you can just open this one in ordinary text editor like Notepad or whatever, and then you see you have the connection string here. You can easily change the SQL Server and the name of the database, and just save the file. Click on bookapp.exe, and then you are connected to the to another SQL Server. So basically, now you have created a professional Windows Forms CRUD application using Visual Studio, C# and SQL Server. So that's all. So good luck with your Windows Forms application and Visual Studio and your CRUD applications. Thank you and goodbye.